Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you today. We're going to talk about sound and profound sleep. And this is from the perspective of Ayurveda and Yoga. So sleep it's one of the four pillars of health in Ayurveda. And it's based on principles in nature. Like attracts like, the opposite qualities bring balance to a situation. So we use the qualities in our choices that will bring the balance to the body and the mind. And this has a huge effect on sleep. The other three legs of the table, I like to think of it that way, or the support for us in life, is our ahar, our diet, vihar, our lifestyle, brahmacharya, how we manage our energy, particularly our sexual energy. These all have a huge impact on the quality and quantity of sleep. So our focus today is just a basic understanding of how to support good quality and quantity sleep in a simple way. So we're meant to rest our body and our mind about a third of our life. So if you were meditating in a cave and that you might not need to sleep very much, but that's not what we're doing. One of the things that we do that burns a tremendous amount of energy is talking. So when we're sleeping, this is when we can do our best healing for the body and the mind. And this is tamas. Tamas, is the darkness of life. It's also stillness when the body becomes inert, and so the mind hopefully can become inert also. And so we need that each day. When Vata and Pitta doshas are in excess, then sleep really can become quite disturbed. And when there's excess Kapha, then the sleep can become excessive. And then that will increase the tamas, which makes us get dull and lethargic. So the doshic times of the day are about the actions that take place in the body and in nature. So for example, it's quite natural to be winding down after 6 o'clock in the evening. You're coming into the Kapha time of day. If you stay up past 10 o'clock at night, then you're coming into the Pitta time of day, and you're going to get a surge of energy. Maybe you're going to want to eat and stay up a lot later. Probably all of us have done some of that before. But this is actually when the best healing can take place for the body and the mind. And it happens while we're sleeping. So it's when we also regenerate our body tissue, our dhatus, and it gives us the opportunity to sort of process things from the day. So after that, then, so that's about 10 to 2-ish, and then you come into the Vata time. So you have the Vata time of the morning. It's a great time to wake up before 6 a.m. because you can do your sadhana, you do your practices then, because the air is it's cleanest, it's light then. There's a whole discussion of something called Brahma Muhurti, that time frame for our spiritual practices. But when you wake up after 6, then there's just that tendency that's in the Kapha time. So there's a little tendency to feel a little heavier through the day. So play with this and notice how it affects you. So dosha imbalances affect our sleep in many different ways. So excess vata will have you awaken between 2 and 6 a.m., for example, and worry. or wake up just feeling like there's a lot of movement going on. And the awakening comes from the movement. So it's natural for vata to be doing its job at that point. When there's an appropriate amount of vata, it doesn't bother us. But when there's too much vata, too much air, particularly air in the ethers, that movement is going on and it wakes us up. It's disruptive. So it's the movement that is happening then is when vata is trying to take nourishment to the tissues of the body and then bring toxins back. So that's the actual activity that's going on. So with excess Pitta, it can be really difficult to sleep with because there's too much thinking. You're going going to sleep and waking up 2 hours later and not being able to go back to sleep. Yeah, and thinking, active mind, planning, what about this, what about that? And then excess kapha, as I mentioned, will have you sleep excessively. And again, that tamas will increase, so dullness in the body and in the mind. And this is also why it's recommended not to nap during the day. Of course, if you're sick or you're ill, then sleep is helpful anytime. Yes, of course. But otherwise, napping during the day is really not a great idea, yeah, because that will start to disturb your sleep pattern. So we need the appropriate quality and quantity of sleep in order to support Agni, our ability to digest everything in life, including food and what's going on in our lives. So when you have dark circles under the eyes, these are a sign that Agni is weakened. And it could also be from not enough sleep. So if it's temporary, you miss, let's say something happens and you fly in the airplane, you don't get much sleep, and you have some dark circles, and then they'll go away. But when the dark circles stay there and you are sleeping, that's Agni. And so when Agni is insulted, Agni, your digestive fire, when it's insulted over a period of time, then it has a close relationship with Vata, and then your sleep will become disturbed. So taking care of Agni is really critical to your health and well-being. We actually have a new program coming out just in this next week or so on how to take care of Agni. It's important to have a winding down period before going to sleep. If you're really active doing things, you're on the computer and all that, and you don't give your mind, especially, it's not really your body as much as the mind, to just wind down and relax, it's going to be very difficult to go to sleep. For years, I thought it was great because because I could operate on 3 hours of sleep a night. I thought I could, and I did that for a couple of 2.5 years. And I thought that was fabulous. How efficient is that? Well, of course, I paid a price for that because it depleted, my Agni became weak. I depleted my ojas, my vitality, and my immunity. So that winding down time frame is really important. So you could have a nighty-night cap or warm milk with some nutmeg or poppy seeds. Those are both spices that have a sedative quality to them. And of course, you can put some other spices, a little ghee in there, maybe a little honey, depending on you and your condition and your constitution. So some spiritual reading before bed too. So either, you might be prayer or meditation or a little reading, something that has you just contemplate yourself on that spiritual basis and on that just having a sense of your greater self. So that means leaving out the electronics. Now, I know that's kind of interesting these days because we're doing everything on the electronics. But the more you can move away from it, making sure to lower the light. A lot of the computers in that have adjustments to the lighting so that in the evening it will automatically go down so that it's not as stimulating in your eyes, which is going to stimulate your mind. There's something called blue blocking glasses. Those can be really helpful. Make sure that when you do go to bed that if the phone is in the room, put it on airplane mode. Make sure at best, if not turning it off completely. And be sure to avoid exposure to any kind of stimulating conversations or activities in the evening. So strong physical activity of any kind isn't a good idea. I know there's some people who will practice yoga asana at 10 o'clock at night and then wonder why they can't go to sleep an hour later. Well, that their energy is all being pulled away for that activity. Right. And so your bed should be for sleeping and lovemaking, not food, not reading, not electronics. Try to keep all of that out of it. And you'll see, because it's really about energy. Make sure your bedding is cleaned and that it's without chemicals. Having chemicals, if you're washing in chemicals and that kind of thing, it can not only disturb your sleep, it's bad for your health. And choose natural fibers as for the best energy for sleeping. So do your reading, or let's say you do a little reading or something before bed, um, in another place in the room, have a chair on the floor, and just try to keep it, just think about it in terms of energy and what you would want to have happening there. Um, Abhyanga, oiling your body is extremely helpful. Uh, some people like to do it before bed. It's just fine. You can also do it in the morning. You can do it in the afternoon if that's what works with your schedule, because doing Abhyanga can be very helpful to your sleep, as well as many other things in your health, in terms of your health and your daily living. But for going to sleep specifically, you can, if you have difficulty going to sleep, a little sesame oil on the bottoms of the feet and put on some socks. A little on the crown of the head. Even just the feet, though, will often help. But if you're willing to put some right on the fontanelle, that's very helpful. But one that I find that works really well is to take a little bit of cotton and dip it in the sesame oil and put it in the ears before going to bed. So you don't have to use so much that it completely blocks your hearing, but it takes down that external stimulation. Very helpful when Vata is high. And then this is an interesting one. It's wear as little clothing as possible when you go to bed. Now, I know if you live in a cold place, and I'm certainly experiencing colds, and that I hadn't for many, many years. But if you just play with it and see, because if you do that and you have bedding that's appropriate to keep you warm, you may find that you feel better in your sleep. And if you're a light sleeper at all, use a shawl or a towel, something nice and clean and of a natural fiber, and cover the top of your head, your ears, and tuck it in around the neck. And this is very good for calming the sleep, calming Vata down while sleeping and keeping you asleep. I know many of us will have trouble waking up many times. And again, this is mostly from disturbance in the dosha. When you share a bed with another person, this is, then you need to establish a bubble around yourself. Because we can love and adore someone and really love being with them, but we don't need to process their energy, nor do they need to process ours during the night. So just as you go to bed, you have your aura, and make a bubble, nice bubble, and a grounding cord to the center of the planet for yourself. And so you'll experience your energy and clear your karmas during the night. And then make sure to block out any light from, especially if you live in a city, and even if you're going to bed, let's say you're going to bed at 9 o'clock, and you live where it's still daylight in the summertime, then you need to block that light out so that you can go to sleep. And make sure that if there's any electronics that blink, that you cover them or remove them or unplug them. And before you go to sleep, it's a really good thing at the end of your day just to sort of assess, how was I in life today? Is there anything that's unfinished or that needs to be cleaned up? And also take a look at what I want to do differently tomorrow. So a prayer or a mantra before sleep, and first thing upon awakening, even before you open your eyes. This is a great way to set your energy for the day. And I do this most of the time. And when I get a little bit in a hurry and don't do it, I can really feel the difference. So find some, even if it's just a statement of appreciation, something that you do before you open your eyes and move into the day. You can set your intention to wake up at a certain time. It said, don't use snooze alarms. This isn't a good idea. The more you learn to work with your energy and your intuition, the better you're going to feel in life. I mean, it's because it's who we are. We are energetic beings. So, relying on alarms and going back to sleep, and that kind of thing, it just creates a lot of excess tamas that we probably don't need. So if you need an alarm, that's fine. I didn't mean to imply that you should never use it, but then when it goes off, turn it off, and then wake and get up gently. So when you set your intention and do it, you'll see it's a good practice because it helps you learn to trust yourself. And so as you do that, then you can start to apply that in other areas of life. So when you get up, then just make sure that you're gentle with yourself. Don't bolt out of bed and turn on some electronics or something like that. So since we're holistic beings, we need to just recognize that everything affects everything else. So one of the big things that affects sleep is caffeine. If you're having trouble sleeping and you're consuming caffeine in any form, well, this is part of the problem. And you might say, well, I hear people say, oh, I can drink a cup of coffee and go to sleep. But that doesn't mean it's not having a negative effect on your body and your mind. So stimulants disturb the doshas, particularly Vata and Pitta, and that's going to disturb your sleep. So you're really stealing from your future. The cycle of the moon also affects us. Some people more than others. It depends on where the moon is placed in your astrological chart. If we look at this from the standpoint of Vedic astrology or Jyotish, so it's good to be aware of the stages of the moon, the cycle, where we are in the cycle, especially if you're a woman and having menstrual cycle. It's a good thing to follow. And so, but back to the moon, so around the full moon especially, some of us will get a little bit disturbed sleep, or it'll be really hard to go to sleep. So don't worry about it. It's okay. It'll be an aberration if you're taking care of yourself in all the other ways. And then sometimes around the new moon, you're going to be a little more tired than normal and wondering, oh, what is this? Well, if it's new moon, that's having a little effect. But you can always do a few extra soothing things to minimize it before bed. Yeah. So when a woman's doshas are imbalanced, then the menstrual cycle can also affect her sleep. So everything affects everything else. So balancing the dosha is the solution. And sometimes some people get thirsty when sleeping, and there's a few reasons for that. One is that they're sleeping with their mouth open, and that's not actually a great idea. Or there could be too much spicing in the food, or the most obvious one is that there's dehydration. Could be from caffeine or just not enough water content food. And water in the diet. So I'm not talking about drinking excess amount of water, because that actually can contribute to an imbalance that leads to aggravating vata, and that would lead to dehydration. So everything just goes straight through you. So water content food and an appropriate amount of water consumed. And just kind of to just be aware of this, the position that you sleep in. So sleeping on your right side will help to reduce Pitta dosha, and on the left side will increase it. And you'll know that because there might be an increase in acidity. But on the left side, you can also reduce kapha if there's an excess there. And sleeping on the back works really well. Sleeping on the tummy is not a great idea. It's not good for your neck and your breathing. If you're getting up during the night to urinate, then there's weakness in the kidneys, and that comes from excess vata. You calm the vata down, and you'll sleep through the night. So caffeine and other vata aggravating things will make a difference in that. And so let's say then you're sitting at your desk and you all of a sudden get really sleepy, or you're in a meeting and suddenly you're just so tired you can hardly hold your head up. So this is a sign of weak digestion. This isn't usually an Agni problem, meaning you ate, it comes to a certain place in your digestive tract, and then and then your body just says, I can't handle this. Agni's not strong enough to burn and transform things. This will come from overeating in one sitting, eating too often, snacking, and there's a number of other reasons. Those are usually the two biggest, though. It can also be from resistance to whatever is being discussed. Yeah, so a lot of times we'll, emotionally, we just start to check out, in which case some of us will get very tired all of a sudden. Sleep is about surrender. It's about surrendering the day, letting go of it. I used to never like that word surrender, but actually I've really grown to love it because I know that what it gives me is freedom, and freedom feels really good. Yeah, and having good quality sleep gives us personal freedom. It allows us to have the energy we want to do the things that we want to do in life and to be able to thrive. So think about it as a surrender, a letting go. And if your ego gets bumped by that, then if you're willing to recognize that might be part of the ego that doesn't really help us very much. So your sleep is critical to your health. Acceptance of your life situation is critical in peaceful sleep. I've certainly had plenty of challenges with that myself lately. But there's always ups and downs in life. So allowing yourself to sleep peacefully, it's really a necessary and it's a beautiful gift to yourself. So think of it that way, that it's where you give yourself, the more you cultivate sattva, or balance and harmony in your life, the more you'll be able to have that in your sleep as well. And then that feeds your life. So everything affects everything else. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about that right now.
Okay, we have some questions. We have two questions about shift work. One of them is for a lady whose husband works 2 to 5 days per week in 12-hour shifts in the evening, but sometimes the 12-hour shifts are in the day. So in that case, they're alternating, and she's wondering how to regulate his routine. Do you want me to share the other shift question or address?
Yeah.
The other shift worker is doing the same hours and every night, and how they deal with it is they sleep from 9 p.m. till 11:45 p.m. Then they work until 6 a.m. and then they have then they work, and then they sleep from 6 a.m. until 11 a.m. and they don't have issues sleeping during this time, but they know that it causes health issues in the long run.
Okay, great. Yeah, these are challenging situations. Let's say someone works shift work, right? So, but having regular shift work is probably the easiest on your system. In other words, if you always work from 11 to 7, now what do you do on your days off? Yeah, and so you want to try to sleep at night at that point, but the regularity is probably one of the is the most helpful thing. When you have shifts that are changing, then what you need to do is just take a look at the 24-hour period and just make sure that you allow for enough sleep there after, preferably, after the work day, if it can work like that, if it makes sense. In both of these situations, that you just try to create as much consistency as possible. In the second situation, where they've split the sleep up, it's, that that probably will create more tamas. But if one is able to actually do that and actually go to sleep and get some restful sleep, the only problem is, well, if you have a 5-hour run, that's pretty good, is that the sleep never gets deep. And excuse me. So you need to just make sure you're doing everything else possible to balance the dosha and that. But if you're sleeping from 6 to 11 a.m., excuse me, that's pretty good actually. And I might try to do a little bit more of that if possible, and reduce the evening as well.
Okay, then we have a couple of questions about people waking up in the night involuntarily. This one lady, she always goes to bed before 10 p.m. so she can wake up before 5:30 a.m. But she's waking up at all kinds of times in the night. Sometimes she goes back to sleep easily, but often she'll be awake for an hour until she falls back to sleep again. And she has tried to do a few things, drinking tea and having melatonin before bed, but it hasn't really helped. And she meditates and does yoga.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think it'd be really important to go back to whatever I've covered so far and see what changes could be made there. Caffeine, especially. Living in a city environment is extremely stimulating, even though you might not be participating in the stimulating things that a lot of people are doing. When if you have a lot of vata and pitta in your constitution, then you're going to have to do some extra work. But again, going back, make sure you take out the caffeine and take out the other stimulants. If you're coming into the vata time of life, over 50, you have to do some extra things. That's where Abhyanga and some of those other practices become very important for keeping vata calm. Then in terms, there are herbs that are very helpful. Most of them would be taken sometimes you can take it in a tea. Tea, though, it's very difficult to regulate the dose, because of the strength of the tea. But also, most of the time you want to do that just shortly before bed. So there are herbs that work very well for it. So waking up during the night many times, if you wake up between 10 and 2, it's more related to pitta. If it's between 2 and 6, generally speaking, then it's going to be related to vata. Yeah, and so you can take a look at what did I eat, what activities was I involved in, and how can I moderate things. Sometimes when the dosha, especially vata, because of its light nature, it's easily affected. And again, a little more easily affected as we come into the vata time of life. So we just have to realize, you fly for 12 hours on an airplane, and that there's probably going to be some disturbed sleep. But doing those things to ground yourself will make a big difference. And especially, you might take a look also at the Spark Your Intuition podcast, because that has just 5-minute meditations on how to use tools, but particularly the grounding tool, grounding your bed, grounding the room, and bringing in the kind of energy and vibration that you'd like to have while you're asleep. So those are all things that are helpful. And the other thing with that grounding is to just is to really disconnect yourself from the city environment, if you're in a city.
This lady wrote in to say, I sleep really well, but often I find it hard to wake up, even after going to bed early.
Mm-hmm. So when it's difficult to wake up in the morning, or you wake up and you feel really groggy, this is a sign that Agni is disturbed. And so you need to take care of Agni. Sometimes that's acceptance in life. Sometimes it's your eating patterns and quantity and quality sometimes, but actually it's the quantity as well as how you eat, and that makes a big difference in your Agni. And then the other thing too is, again, the stimulants and things like that, because if your mind stays active when you go to sleep, then you won't go into a deep sleep There's not the letting go. Yeah. So, and Agni also remembers about acceptance in life.
What does snoring mean? How can my husband stop snoring? Why do I need perfect silence to sleep?
So needing perfect silence to sleep, is usually vata. There's some vata disturbance. We get really sensitive. So the cotton with sesame oil in the ears can be very helpful for that. But snoring, it can be the position of the person sleeping in, but usually it has to, and it can be disturbed Agni. They overeat, they don't chew, things like that. Those are all things that will set up a pattern of resistance. And it can be just also emotional resistance, meaning, somebody's angry or resentful or whatever. And those will, that will also create a lot of snoring.
And she also asked, why if I sleep 8 hours do I still feel tired? I go to bed at midnight.
Okay. Well, you remember I just mentioned about Pitta dosha. And if you stay up into that Pitta time, your energy gets up. So your sleep's probably not as peaceful as it could be. And the other thing that happens is that a lot of times when we stay up late, we actually don't go to sleep. We actually pass out. Meaning, if you're exhausted, then I used to think that was really great, that I could just lay down and go to sleep just like that. But then when I came to Ayurveda, then I learned that, what was really going on was I was really just so exhausted, I just passed out. And then I'd start waking up at other times of day. So going to bed at midnight is not a great idea. I would suggest that, unless something, your work forces you to do that, I would not do that. I would be going to bed earlier and getting up earlier, and you'll see. I've never had anybody tell me that they felt worse after doing that. Always feeling better. And yeah, okay. Start telling stories.
It happens to me that I always wake up at 3 a.m. very thirsty and hot. What can it be, and how can I improve it?
Okay. Waking up at 3 a.m. thirsty and hot. That has to do with digestion most of the time. And what that means is probably there's some food, there's too much dryness, too much heat in the food, or you're just not digesting it. So if you're not digesting it, then there'll be an increase in heat. Inflammation will come about eventually, and you'll get thirsty and hot during the night. Could be vata, could be pitta. It could be either one. It's often both of them. And so how you improve that is you do things to take a look at how you're eating, as well as what you're eating, but how it's happening and when, and those kinds of things, because that's how we can take care of Agni, and then Agni will be able to digest what we eat, and then this doesn't happen.
And someone asked, what is an appropriate amount of water?
Okay, well, so you need to have water content food, means whole grains and vegetables, yeah, because they have moisture in them, we cook them and they have more moisture, and we should consume the moisture. That's where the majority of it needs to come from. And then somewhere, most people who are not excessive in any way, that are conducting life and that are going to be between about a liter or a quart and a liter and a half. Now, if you live in a really dry environment, you're going to go toward the high side of that. If you live in a not so moist environment, you probably don't need that much. But it also really depends a lot on what you're eating. If you're a heavy meat eater, then you might need a little bit more on that higher side. Excess amounts of water are just strain the kidneys and it increases vata.
Should you try and keep the same sleep schedule on the weekends? Since I'm working, I tend to get up a little bit later.
Okay. I would really, as much as possible, keep the same schedule on the weekends. And that, if you've stayed up later, then there might be a good reason to go to sleep later. But then you always have to ask yourself, why am I staying up? And is it really something that's important to me? Because there will be a negative effect. But it's going to be very small, and if it's worth it to you, whatever you're doing, then do it. So most important is to pay attention to how you feel, because that's what's going to, again, when we feel well in life, we're able to be productive and enjoy ourselves and have some fun with it.
And you mentioned the nighttime milk, and someone wrote in, how about turmeric in nighttime milk?
Okay. I'm just laughing because, we just have to be really careful about all the fads going by. Turmeric is wonderful stuff. It is wonderful. It is not wonderful in large quantities. It is not meant for us to be eating it all the time. It is drying and heating. It's drying. So just think about that. A little pinch in your milk at night, fine. Do you need it every night? No. And again, it depends a little bit on your constitution, right? So if you don't have a problem with dryness and you don't have any problem with vata or pitta, for example, then, have it every night. But why not vary it with some other spices that'll also be very supportive? Having it all the time is going to increase pitta and then eventually increase vata. So it's a choice. I would suggest, though, with turmeric, the way you use it is that you cook with it. You cook with it on a regular basis, not excessive amounts. Everything shouldn't be yellow. Again, it's wonderful stuff, but there are many wonderful things. And that's why in Ayurveda, when we make an herbal formula, that we put a number of things together to bring balance. So poking at something and just saying, oh, I'm going to take this one thing and take lots of it, so because it's going to fix inflammation, I tell you, it really doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Okay, and what about waking up with a slight headache?
Sounds very unpleasant. I've had that happen myself. Usually, you can say it's from tension, or you can say it would be from undigested food, where Agni hasn't been able to do its job fully. And so then that's when you start to get inflammation in the digestive tract. And so, so those are the things that you want to look at. You want to solve that problem, taking care of Agni so that you're digesting properly. And then also the things that I mentioned already about, winding yourself down in the evening, having an assessment of the day and so forth, so that you can surrender and let go when you go to sleep. And if you have a headache, well, there's vata, pitta, and kapha type headaches. But let's say the headache is if it's in the back, it's vata. If it's sharp inside, it's pitta. And if it's sort of dull and more front and all over, it's kapha. But there are a number of pastes that you can make with ginger and some other things, sometimes turmeric. That will help take it away. And there's also some really lovely tylums or oils that are made with herbs that will also help give relief for that right away.
Okay, 2 more questions.
Okay.
In regards to food and rest, how do you feel about dry fasting for rebalancing the doshas?
Dry fasting.
So no water.
No water. Yeah. No. I could imagine a very specific situation with a very specific person where that might be appropriate, but definitely not for general public. The body is made up, I think it's somewhere between 70 and 80% of water. So we need it. We need the moisture. But every time you don't give it food and the appropriate amount of water, you're weakening your Agni. So could I imagine a very specific situation with a very specific person that could be called for? Yes, that is possible. Not likely for most people ever. Fasting is something that needs to happen from dinner to breakfast every single day. And when you do that, that's what's needed, so that you're not trying to digest food, especially while you're sleeping, you see. So, because if you ever eaten a meal, eaten it late, had it be, and then try to go to sleep an hour later, and maybe you get to sleep and you wake up in the morning and you feel like it's all still sitting there, because it is. Yeah. And that's going to not only cause you the unpleasantness at that moment and the accumulation of toxins from that food not digesting, but it also weakens your Agni for the next meal. So, and so fasting is just something that weakens the Agni. Having a fast every night between dinner, let's say you eat dinner at 6 o'clock and you have breakfast at 7:30 or 8 o'clock the next morning, that's plenty of fasting every day.
Any advice for clenching teeth or grinding while sleeping?
Yes. Okay. So, well, obviously you want to go back and take a look at, am I consuming caffeine? Because that's going to be a big contributor. Lack of acceptance in life. This is also a big contributor. Worry, which comes with excess vata, calm vata down. But there's some simple remedy things that you can do, one of which is to take a teaspoon of raw white rice before bed, and you put it in your mouth and you chew it. And you chew it for 5 minutes. And so there'll be a little bit of liquid comes off of it, and that has a sweet taste to it. And that part can be swallowed, but you chew, 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 chew. Don't swallow the rice, and then you spit it out after the 5 minutes. And so what that does is it helps take tension out of the jaw, and also that little sweet taste will just initiate that relaxation response. Okay, good. I think that's it for today. I hope this has been helpful to you, and that you can start to see, how more and more how holistic we are, and that we need to just always take a look. Become your own scientist, and become your own healer. Take a look at, what is everything I'm doing. It's not about good and bad and right and wrong. It's just about finding and working with the right things for us at that particular time. And that might change, just as we all know, lots of change. Okay, until next time.